Hey, today we're gonna go over this podcast set. I'm gonna go over all my processes in detail of how I record and produce multiple podcasts a week here at the studio. My name is Brent Pierce. I own Round Rock Studio, a podcast studio in Austin, Texas, where we record and produce multiple podcasts a week for some amazing clients. So let's go over everything. First of all, this is the set. So I've done an overview video in the past of this set, but this video is going to be quite a bit more detailed for podcast producers out there. So if you're setting up your own podcast and you want to know how I record it, what equipment I use, what buttons I push, and all that jazz, this video is going to be a little bit more catered to that because I'm going to go into a whole lot more detail than I went through last time. Let's get started. Alrighty, so first of all, we're going to start with audio. This is the audio that I use. The mics are RØDE PodMics. This is the original PodMic. You can see because it's silver. I don't love the look of the silver mic, so I throw these windscreens on. These windscreens come with the RØDE PodMic USB version, which I also have. So it came with these windscreens, so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stick them on that, so I no longer have silver mics. I have these, and they're kind of big and bulky, but honestly, I don't hate it. The arms here are these Gator Frameworks arms. They're pretty good. As you can see, I put a black piece of gaff tape on here to cover up the logo because the logo is white and red, so when it shows on camera, it's a little bit distracting. But piece of black gaff tape solved it. The arms are connected to this coffee table here. The coffee table's on wheels, so I can easily kind of shift these two mics together. If I need to go back a few inches, it's pretty easy. Just unlock the wheels, push it back, lock the wheels back in. It's pretty easy. When I'm telling people how to use this mic, I say about 4 to 5 inches from your face, pretty close. And they're always taken aback. They're always like, whoa, that's like very close. And so usually I move the mic for them into position. So you kind of get a little bit intimate with them because, you know, you're like doing this and they're like, whoa, hello, stranger. Nice to meet you. But that's what I do. So I position it about like this. The camera's typically a little bit more over there, but I don't do it like this because then you can't see my mouth, right? Obviously I want to be able to see their mouth. So I go down a little bit, about like that, bada bing, bada boom. And then they talk, they can do this, they can do whatever. And I always tell them, if you want to move around, that's fine. Like if you shift your weight and all of a sudden you're over here, that's great. Just bring the mic with you, right? Because I want to be able to hear you. And inevitably, especially for first-time podcasters, they'll do this. They'll be like, yeah. And then they'll sit back here and do the rest of the show. And I'm like, no. So sometimes I have to pause in the middle of the show and just be like, hey, can you like move your mic like that? And then just leave it. That's pretty good. Because we want to be able to hear even the tiniest little voices that they speak, right? We don't want them to feel like they have to project and artificially talk louder than they typically would. This is a podcast. We're trying to get vulnerable and intimate with them, right? So we want them to be able to feel like they can just whisper and still have their voice heard. So that's why you gotta have a podcast mic a few inches from your face. These chairs, I love these chairs. These are IKEA chairs. Can't go wrong with IKEA. I take that back. You can go wrong with IKEA, but I love these chairs. I've got a few blue ones. The background, I'm not going to touch on set design too much because I think that's very, that's really up to the person setting up the set. So like I can talk about my set, of course, but I don't want to give much direction on how to set up your set because every set's going to be different. But I just have some shelves with a few trinkets and some books back there. For some podcasts, we'll take the books down because maybe they don't really match the topic of discussion, right? But all these are kind of like business books that I've read and they're colorful, they look good. Citizen Kane's up there. I mean, that's a Blu-ray box set. I think it's not even a book, but it's up there. Also, there are some fake plants. There are some trinkets up there. There's some fake plants down there and all that jazz. So that's pretty much it for the set design that I'm going to talk about, I think. If you have any more questions about set design, of course, feel free to ask me, but set design is so unique to every person that I'm not really going to touch on it too much. One thing to talk about, on this set, we don't use headphones. I feel like headphones are great for some sets, especially if you're doing a virtual podcast. Headphones are great. Use headphones for sure. But when you're having a natural, relaxed conversation, headphones are artificial. You are artificially listening to the person who's like 3 feet away from you. There's really no need to do that, right? I don't need to take their voice, digitize it, send it through cables, and then put these things on your head. Like, it's an artificial way of listening to the person. So I don't really like that. So I always encourage people not to do headphones. We've done headphones here in the past, of course, if they ask for it, but 9 times out of 9, I'm not going to do headphones in this set. We have another set that we've done headphones for in the past, just because that's how I did it. I don't know. If I were to do it now, I think I would steer people away from using headphones if possible. Sometimes you need to use them, but for this set, we don't encourage headphones. One thing you'll see around this set are fake plants everywhere. Like, is this in frame here? It's a fake plant here. There are fake plants down there. There are little fake plants here. There are fake plants over there. Fake plants are a great way to bring color and a little bit of life into the studio, right? Because when I first moved in here, it was bare bones. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to need so much furniture and so many things just to fill the space, because it's a huge space that I had. And so I immediately bought a bunch of fake plants, and it really helps fill the space. So, word to the wise, buy fake plants, and buy some good quality fake plants as well. I probably need to up my fake plant production here. I think I need to retire these and buy some nicer ones, but they get the job done. So all that being said, buy some fake plants. So again, these 2 microphones are plugged in with XLR. The XLR is integrated into this arm, which is a great feature. It goes down here, it goes behind the table, and it's tucked away through the corner, and it goes all the way back to the control table. We're going to go over that here in a little bit. So all you need to know, 2 XLRs for audio, go to the control table. All right, I'm going to go to this other chair just so we can see it. All right, here we are at the other table. Same setup, same mic, same arm, and all that jazz. The decor behind me, I have a lot of vintage cameras that I have just collected over the years. So these shelves have a lot of vintage cameras on it, which is great. More fake plants, there's books. This just helps add texture and a little bit of dark color. My walls are white, so I wanted some dark color behind. These are curtains I picked up from Walmart, and the frames are actually made by my grandpa when I was a kid. He made these forever ago, and my mom was getting rid of them. They were in her attic, and I was like, whoa, hang on, can I take those to work and use them? So that's all they are. They're just blue curtains. All right, so let's talk about lighting. When it comes to video production, lighting is super, super important. So, of course, when it comes to podcasting, lighting is just as important. I'm a cinematographer, like by trade. That's what my background is. I love cinematography. So I really dove into lighting. But if you're new to cinematography or you're not really comfortable with lighting, you don't have to listen to me. Just know, really all you have to do is get a couple soft lights and then point them at the set. I've done the exact opposite. I've got soft lights back here, and they are pointed on the other side of the people, okay? That is a cinematography technique. But again, if you're not familiar with that, that's perfectly fine. All you need to know is that soft light is key, okay? Soft light is key. So for this setup, as you can see, I got 2 soft lights here. These are Amaran 200Ds. Amaran 200Ds. 200 means they are 200 watt. The D means they are daylight balanced, okay? They're a little bit cool to match the color of daylight. 200Ds with 42-inch softboxes with grids on it, okay? And they are positioned on the other side of the people, hitting their face from the opposite side of the camera. I'm gonna zoom in and go over that here in just a second. But again, this is called a far side key. If you don't wanna tackle this, then ignore everything I just said and get soft lights and put them behind the cameras pointed at the set. That'll get you 87% of the way there. If you want that extra 13%, you can do a far side key. So those are my key lights. I also have a fill light over here. This is just a dome to provide general fill, so it's not super dark on the shadowy side of my face. I also have some 4-foot quasar tubes in the back set to warm. That is to provide a little bit of light on the shoulder to separate the person from the background. Again, lighting can get very complicated. So if you're not comfortable with everything that I'm saying, just get soft lights, put them behind the camera, shine them at the people, and call it a day. Let me go over far side key by moving the camera just a little bit. Hang on. Okay, so this is typically what my podcast camera looks like. Okay, it's looking at the guest or the host, and they're talking to the person over there. So this is how it would work. If I'm looking this way and the camera's right there, so I'm looking left of the camera, that means the key light also needs to be left of the camera, okay, on the other side of the person. That's how far side key works. So you can see if I'm looking here, this side of my face is brighter than this side of my face, okay? This is the key light hitting me. This is the fill light hitting me. That's how you shape a face in cinematography. 3-point lighting is very important. It's very important that you put the lights in the correct spot. This is far side key. This is how I like it as a cinematographer. So this is how I set up my podcast studio. If I look directly at camera, which side of my face is brighter? This side, right? Just by a little bit, but it's able to shape my face, because if I'm looking at the person, you can see it shapes my face a whole lot better. But again, if all this is too much, just put your key light where it's easy to put it and just light the scene in a soft, flattering way. If you have the flexibility and the experience, and if you're comfortable doing 3-point lighting and you want to put your key light on the far side, that's how I recommend it, and that's what I did here. Another thing I did is I did a backlight with 4-foot quasar tubes. These are set to 3000 Kelvin about, so they're very warm. So if we look at what this backlight is doing, it's separating me from the background. You can kind of see it. If I move that out of the way, you can kind of see what it's doing, right? See that shadow? I'm blocking it. So you can see without the light, it would be a little bit darker, but with the light, it's separating me from the background. Like, it's very subtle, but cinematography and lighting is all about subtlety. So that's what it's doing. Let me turn this off just so we can kind of see a difference. Hang on. So I unplugged it, and you can see that it's not there anymore. Actually, it doesn't look bad now that I look at it. But I don't have any separation from this black hat to the background. There's not a whole lot of separation there. That's what a backlight or a hair light, often like it's called, that's the point of a hair light, is that it separates you from the background. So again, this is what it looks like without the hair light, and this is what it looks like with the hair light. See, it adds a little bit of separation from the background. So that's 3-point lighting, okay? I love 3-point lighting. I teach a workshop about 3-point lighting. So if you're interested, hit me up. I can hook you up somehow. 3-point lighting, you've got a key light, you've got a fill light, and you've got a hair light. That's 3 lights. Key, fill, hair. My key light is on the far side of the camera, so it's over here, so it's lighting this side of my face. Fill light is filling in these shadows, so it's not super dark. You can see what it's doing there. Hair light separates me from the background. That's how I have this set up. And again, if you're not comfortable with this, or you're listening to me and you're thinking, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, he's just saying words, he doesn't know anything about anything, that's fine. You don't have to do this. You can just get soft lights and put them over there by the cameras and shine it this way. That's perfectly fine. No one's going to bat an eye if you do that. No one's going to tell you you're doing it wrong. No one's going to point it out, because this is a podcast. It's okay to break rules with a podcast. Now, if you're lighting a short film and you put your key light on the wrong side, people are going to give you heck for it. Me being one of them, right? Cinematography 101, you don't put your key light on the wrong side. But podcasting, you can break the rules. Podcasting, it's the Wild West. Put the lights wherever you want, okay? Who cares? Break the rules. Nobody cares. Anyways, that's lighting. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about lighting. I could talk shop about lighting all day long. As far as the backlights go, you'll see these blue lights here. These are LED lights behind the shelf, and I've got another one behind the TV over here. Again, that's just to add some visual fun, right? Not too crazy, but it's subtle and it's there. We also change that depending on what show is in here. So if there's like a feminine show and they want pink, by golly, we can make it pink, okay? But generally, I like the color blue, because blue is the opposite color of your skin tone, okay? So if your skin tone is orange on the color wheel, blue is pretty much the opposite. So I oftentimes like using backlights as blue. Okay, we covered the set. Let me show you how I mounted these lights to the wall. All right, so here we are. This is the Amaran 200D that I'm talking about. This is the key light. So these are connected to the wall with these arms. They're screwed into the wall. This arm gives me the flexibility to move it. I can move it up and down. I can extend it a little bit. They're great. I love it. One thing I don't love is having C-stands all over the studio. You don't want this to feel like a studio. You want it to feel like a living room, right? You want people to feel comfortable when they come in here, not like they're walking into like a TV set. It's very intimidating if they do that. So one way to get rid of the C-stands is, of course, mount them to the wall. These mounts are from Neewer. If you look on Amazon, there are tons of companies that make these. I bought them from Neewer. Neewer is a decent company that I bought stuff from before, and it's always pretty good quality. The soft boxes that I use are Glow is the brand. It says Glow on the other side. Easy Lock is the model. 42-inch beauty dish. Is there 2 layers of diffusion in here? Let's see. Yes. So there's 2 layers of diffusion in here. There's a layer inside that diffuses it, and then there's the front layer that diffuses it, and then of course the grid. So there's a lot of diffusion going on. Everything that you add will stop down your light though. So you want to make sure you get a bright enough light. So the 200D is pretty good for me. It's actually perfect for me. My lights are pretty close to the subject, so 200D with double diffused and a grid worked out perfect. If your podcast set is larger and your lights are going to have to be a whole lot farther from your subject, you might need a brighter light. Or also, if your podcast set is smaller and your lights are going to be pretty close to your subject, you might not even need a 200D. I will say this though, there are a ton of bright lights out there. Don't feel like you have to get the brightest and best. You don't need to spend $2,000 on a light that's going to be 8 feet to 10 feet from your subject, right? That's overkill. That's wasting money. That's spending $2,000 when you could have spent $200. You could have gotten a bunch of these. Just buy what you need, okay? Another thing while we're up here, I have a speaker up here that's connected to my RØDECaster audio board. So I can play music through here. I can play people's voices through here if they have a virtual call. There's a speaker on each bookshelf. But more on that later. Okay, bye. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the cameras. Obviously, cameras are a very important part of filming a podcast. Okay, so I use the Panasonic Lumix S1 cameras. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of you are probably thinking, I've never heard of that. Other people are probably thinking, why do you use that? Or some people probably aren't really thinking anything. But I've been on the Lumix line of cameras since a long time ago when I used to film weddings and events. Lumix really made its stake in weddings and events back in the GH5 days. And ever since then, I've stayed within the Lumix line of cameras. I love them. They're great. They're not perfectly set up for podcasting like Sony is, but they get the job done. So let's talk about it. The lens on this one is the Lumix 24-105 f4. It's a decent lens. I shoot all these cameras in 4K 60 frames per second. I started recording podcasts at 60 frames per second back in the day, and I like 60 frames per second. You don't have to do that, but I've found that it's very smooth. Podcasts don't really need to be cinematic, so you don't need to shoot them at 24. So I thought, what the heck, I'm just going to shoot them at high frame rate at 60 frames per second and see how it goes. And I like the look of it. When you put this camera in 4K 60, it crops the sensor. So it is a full frame sensor, but whenever you're shooting at 4K 60, it actually only uses a part of the sensor. That's one of the drawbacks, but hey, it is what it is. Typically, I'm zoomed in about 50 to 55 on the lens. So if you're doing the math, if you're using a crop sensor on a 50 mil lens, it's going to crop it into about 75. Okay, so I'm pretty zoomed in on my lenses. You don't have to be that zoomed in. Again, every space is going to be different. So you don't have to use my exact method, but this is just what I use. Another thing you'll see, I have 2 cables here. This provides power, so I never have to worry if this battery is charged. I just plug it in and it's charged. I don't want to have to worry about batteries. Okay, there's so much going on in here, and when a client comes in, it just has to work. And if they have like a 3 to 4 hour podcast session, or if I have back-to-backs, I don't want to think about batteries. So I plug all my cameras in with USB-C. Keeps the batteries topped up and fully charged. Also, I've got an HDMI here. This is how the feed gets to the video switcher. This is a little 90-degree angle just to kind of clean up the cable so it's not sticking out too far. I do have some trouble with these. If you move it around, it'll lose its signal, but since they're stationary, it doesn't lose its signal when it's just sitting still. I have a custom setting on all these cameras that is perfectly set for this podcast look. So even if I use this camera for something else and I change the settings and I fiddle around with all the buttons, when I put it here, I can just set it to my C3, which is my podcast setting, and it's perfectly set every single time. So I don't have to worry about remembering where my settings are or pushing the buttons and then going to the next camera and pushing the buttons and then going to the next camera and getting it all right. All I have to do is put it in C3 and then bada bing, bada boom, it's perfect every single time. Again, it's all about ironing out those friction points so you can have a very efficient system. The tripods that I use are all Manfrotto tripods, so they all use the same quick release plate. So all my cameras have the same quick release plate, so I don't have to worry about switching quick release plates and all that stuff. They are all compatible with each other. All right, so here are my settings. f4.5, ISO 1250. That's where it is on my setup with my lens and my camera. Your camera and lens are going to be different, so you don't have to match that exactly. One thing that I also do is I use a contrasty picture profile. I don't shoot this in log. I know a lot of cinematographers, they love log. I love log as well. Log is basically, it shoots it very flat and not contrasty or saturated. So then when you're editing it, you can add a bunch of fancy color grades and you can save your highlights and like make it look fancy in the color grade. You can make it look a whole lot more cinematic if you shoot log. But remember, this is a podcast. I want to be able to shoot this and deliver it ASAP as possible, right? So I'm shooting in landscape. There's a landscape picture profile in these cameras, which is pretty contrasty and saturated. I think it looks amazing. So I put them all on landscape, and then when I'm done with the show, it's already graded. I don't have to worry about grading it. It's one less step that I have to worry about. Also with this camera, the autofocus is not great. So I'm shooting it with another Lumix camera, so you might even see the autofocus bouncing back and forth. I don't love the autofocus on these cameras, so I actually shoot them in manual focus. If you have another, like a newer camera, or a Canon or a Sony that has reliable, dependable autofocus, you can use autofocus. Because oftentimes, what I have to do is I have to kind of get up out of my seat and adjust the focus, right? If the talent leans forward or moves back, they're going to be way out of focus. So, just something to keep in mind. Use autofocus if you have a camera that's good autofocus. These don't have good autofocus, but it is what it is. I just rock them in manual. Anyways, I think that's it for the camera. Let's move on to the control center. Okay, so before we move on to the control center, I wanted to talk about this. This is a remote that turns everything on. Again, it's all about efficiency. You don't want to have to go around turning on each individual light and then turning on the TV and then moving all the stuff. What you want to do is make it as easy as possible. So I have everything plugged into this remote so I can turn it off or I can turn it back on with a push of a button. Isn't that great? And just in a second, you'll see the TV boot up with the logo. There it is. That TV, by the way, is connected to a computer, so I can put the client's logo on the TV, or I can put a video on the TV if we wanted to do like a live stream or something like that. So this is just a cheap Amazon remote that you plug this into your outlet, and then this responds to this, right? So I have all my lights and my TV plugged into a couple of these. I have it programmed to channel number 1, and I just turn it on with the push of a button. So again, it's all about streamlining and making everything as efficient as possible. Okay, let's go to the control center. Okay, so we are here at the control center. It's really just a table with a couple things on it, but you know, control center sounds pretty cool. So we're here at the control center. As you can see, the set is behind me. I'm over here. I can add a little curtain here as well if I really wanted to just give them privacy so they don't feel like somebody's like watching them do their podcast. So I kind of like being separated from the podcast set. So anyways, let's dive in here. We have the audio board. This is the RØDECaster Pro II. This has the mics plugged into it. I also have a little talkback mic that I added. And this is the video switcher. This is the Blackmagic ATEM Mini Pro ISO. I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to boot this up and talk about it. So let's start with the audio. Let's boot it up. Ooh, the colors. Did you see that? Everybody loves some good colored LED lights. So this is the RØDECaster Pro II. This is what I use. They have a first gen, which works. Tascam also makes one that works. So as long as you have something to process your audio, because remember, audio is the most important part of any podcast, of any production ever, really. audio is the most important part. So this thing has great preamps. The mics plug into it. They sound great. You get faders. So my 2 mics are plugged into these first 2. If I have 2 other mics, I will of course plug them into 3 and 4. Right now, I added this talkback mic. This is just in case they ask me something on the podcast. If they're like, hey, Brent, what do you think about this topic we're talking about? I can turn this up and be like, oh, here's what I think. Here's my popular opinion. Since you're asking the guy behind the camera, here's what I think. So I can talk into that so they can hear me. Otherwise, it stays down. If they have headphones on, I can talk to them like this if I ever needed to. But again, we don't really use headphones. This is also cool because you can connect your phone with Bluetooth. You can play anything you want from your phone to here. Also, remember, I said I had speakers over there, so I could play music through that. So I've actually added some custom music here. So if I ever just wanted chill vibes, I push that button and it's chill vibes. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's playing chill vibes. That's an hour-long loop. So it plays and then it just keeps playing. So it's also good if I just need ambience in here, like if I'm having an event or if there's just like people hanging out and I want just a little bit of ambient music, I can just push that and it plays through those speakers, right? I've got that one. I've got old school hip hop. I don't know if you can hear that. And I've also got groovy. I don't know. Again, these are just different playlists just to have some ambient music going on. There's also sound effects that I never use, but they're there. My kids love it. When my kids come to work with me, they're always like, Dad, can I put the headphones on and like make noise with the board? And I'm like, sure. And then I come back and I'm like, what did you do? Everything is different. You changed the colors of it. How did you do that? So I always have to reset it back to its default state, but it is what it is. Kids are great. So that's this board. Okay. There are 2 outputs here, right? There are main outputs that look like this. So on the back of my audio board, I've got these 2 jacks, right? A dual 1/4 inch TS. And then at the other end of this cable is an 1/8 inch jack, 1/8 inch TRS. Okay. It's a little bit confusing, but a dual 1/4 inch TS cable to an 1/8 inch TRS cable. That's how I get audio from my board into my switcher. So it goes out here. Let me plug this back into this cable, and this cable plugs into mic 1 on my video switcher. That's how this audio gets to this video switcher. Speaking of video switcher, let's plug it in. There we go. That's what it looks like. Let me turn some cameras on so we can actually see what it looks like. All right. So we've got images here. You can see 1 and 3. This is how you use this switcher. You bring up what you want to bring on deck and then you cut it or you fade it on. I always cut. I never use the fade. And the audio comes into here. The only audio source that I have active for program came from this board. Remember, it went out and into mic 1. So mic 1 is this whole thing. This switcher records to an SSD. This is a Samsung T5, 2 terabyte. So this can record many, many hours of shows before I have to empty it out. You just plug it in with a USB-C and it records onto here. The things that it records is program, right? So the actual show that you're cutting, but it also records the individual shots, which is great. That's why it's called the ISO, which means isolation. So it isolates all the cameras so you can then edit it later. And it even gives you a DaVinci Resolve project file that you can import, and then you automatically see your cuts so you can then start making edits to the show that you've already done an initial cut on. It's great. One little trick that I do is that if I make a mistake, or let's say the guests make a mistake, or if they say, hang on, pause, I need to go to the restroom or whatever. If there's any kind of edits that I know I need to do during the show, I will go to a still image. I will cut to that still image, okay? In this case, it's my logo. I'll cut to that still image so later, whenever I'm looking at my timeline, I can quickly find the things that need to be fixed. This has saved me so much time, because if I didn't do this, if I just made a mental note, then I would go back into the timeline and I would have to manually scrub through and try to find the thing that needs to be fixed, and that's just wasted time. So I make notes during the show by just simply going to that. Now, obviously, this doesn't work if you're live streaming, because you don't want to show the live stream your still image, right? So in that case, you would need to just jot down on a piece of paper the thing that you need to fix. But if you're just doing a show to then edit, to then deliver, then go to your still image if you need to fix any mistakes. It's great. So after the show is recorded, I push stop, and then I push stop on here as well. I do record on this as a backup, so I can have audio as a backup. But after the show, I take the SSD and then I plug it in to that computer right there. Oh, hi, it's me over here on the computer. Anyways, I've got this SSD. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna plug it into this computer here, just with another USB-C cable, plug it in. The computer, by the way, is a Mac Mini. It's taped underneath the desk. So I've got everything plugged into it, and it's just in a little cradle that's like double-sided taped to the underside of that desk. It's been there for years and it has never fallen off. It's rock solid. So now that I have that SSD in here, what I'm gonna do, if I open up a Finder window, so if I bring up this ATEM drive, you can see these folders. These are different shows that I've recorded. What I do is I grab the entire folder, because within this folder, there are your audio source files and there's your video source files. So I just grab this entire folder, I copy it, and then I'm gonna paste it onto my server. I have a server in the closet. All these computers are connected with 10 gig Ethernet cable through the wall into the closet. I have a 6-bay 72 terabyte drive at RAID 6. It's a Synology NAS onto a QNAP switch. So I'm not gonna go into that. I just rattled that off because I know some people are gonna be interested into what type of server I have running. That's what I got and it works. But again, I'm not gonna go into that in this video. Maybe I'll go into it in a separate video, but I have a NAS because I also do commercial video production, which takes a ton of space, right? Terabytes and terabytes of space per month. So it made sense that I get a large NAS. If you're only doing podcasts, each show per hour long show is gonna be about 150 gigs. So using that calculations, just realize you're gonna need a few terabytes of space. You might not need a large server like I have, but you're at least gonna need like a 6 terabyte drive that you can work off of. And it needs to be fast enough so you can work off of it. So all that being said, I copy that onto my server and then I open it up in DaVinci Resolve. So in Resolve, I use the cloud projects. It's $5 a month. All my projects live in the cloud. So on any of my machines, I can access them. I can also share those projects with remote editors and we can work in them simultaneously. It's $5 a month, totally worth it in my mind. So I throw them in here. I have a slightly organized folder structure here. You know, each show gets their own folder. So let's open up one here. I import the DaVinci Resolve project file that came from the switcher, and then I open it up and it's gonna look like this. So as you can see, there's already cuts happening on the timeline from what we did earlier. So if I need to go through and make an edit, I can just drag the clip around, right? It has the entire shot. So you can edit, you can re-edit the entire show if you really wanted to. That's the amazing thing about this, is that it gives you a timeline to where you can edit, you can re-edit your show that you did. I love that feature. So if the client wants to add music, we add music into it at this point. I have certain timelines that I've exported for each client that has their music and intro animations in it. So all I do is import that timeline in DaVinci Resolve, and then I throw it into this new edited timeline. And then, you know, it's like a 5 to 10 minute process. It's very quick. Again, we've got it streamlined, so we don't spend a whole lot of time on each show. After I do this, I go into the Deliver tab, I export it. I export MP4 H.265 for these longer form podcasts. I don't do H.264. H.265 is going to give you a smaller file size. And I do that because these are sometimes 2-hour long shows. So if you did H.264, that'd be like 20 something gigs. That's a very large file to deliver over the internet. So I do H.265. If you do H.265 though, you're going to need a pretty beefy computer to crunch it down to that size. Once it's crunched, any computer can play it fairly easily, but just know that if you're going to compress it with H.265, you're going to have a pretty beefy computer to do that. So MP4 H.265, I export it here, and then I throw it onto Dropbox. Dropbox is what we use to deliver all of our files to our clients. We've used it for years. I love it. I've never had any issues with it whatsoever. I throw it in Dropbox into their client portal folder. Each client has their own folder, so they can go to that folder and they can see all the episodes that we've ever done, including all the photos that we've included, including all the social media assets. Everything is in their client portal. So I throw it in their client portal, and then I Slack message my studio manager, and she emails them the link. I try not to email ever. I hate emails. So I have someone on my team who manages emails. She manages most of the client interactions. A few other things to keep in mind. We do social media cuts using Opus. Oftentimes, a client will want some quick social media cuts. So we throw it into Opus Clip. If you're not familiar with Opus Clip, it's an AI-enabled social media editor. So you give it the long-form podcast, it picks out the little short nuggets that would be good, and it gives you those little videos with captions on it and everything. And you can even add music and stuff. We don't do that, but it's great for just picking those short-form social media clips from the long-form content. So that's an add-on that we do for a lot of our clients. So anyways, that's the process. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I don't think I did. Inevitably, I'm sure I missed like a huge thing. Somebody's going to be like, well, you didn't talk about the most obvious thing in the room. Maybe I did. Maybe I missed it. But either way, thanks for watching. If you have any questions whatsoever, leave them in the comments. Running a podcast studio is fun. I get to hear a lot of podcasts that I would otherwise never listen to, right? I only listen to a few podcasts when I'm in my car and stuff, but when I'm here, I get to listen to so many other podcasts that are completely outside of the things that I'm actually interested in life. So it's cool. It's actually opened up my eyes to a lot of the world that I otherwise would not be exposed to. So it's really cool. It's really fun running a podcast studio. It's also really hard. I have a podcast myself where I talk with other studio owners, and oftentimes the conversation does go towards how hard and stressful it is to run a business, but that's part of it, right? All entrepreneurs, we choose this life. We choose the stress because it does allow a certain level of freedom and flexibility with our schedules and with our lives. But anyways, I'm rambling at this point. Thanks for liking and subscribing and doing all the things. I really appreciate every single person who watches this. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love interaction. Goodbye. Until next time. Peace.